Hi, everybody. This is Nalini Elkins with Industry Network Technology Council. Welcome to our webinar on 6LoWPAN trace reading. This session is being recorded, and we will be giving out the presentations afterwards, of course. If somebody can tell me that you're hearing me okay, that would be wonderful. And we'll go ahead and get going here. So, as many of you know, this is one of our webinars in our IPv6 series, where we are doing a multi-year project on getting enterprises moving towards IPv6, but securely. And if any of you would like to talk to us about help in planning out your IPv6 network, please do contact us. We're happy to talk to you. So this series is possible because of a grant from ISIF Asia to the India Internet Engineering Society, which is a partner of INTC. So thank you so much to ISIF. If you are in the Asia Pacific region, do keep in mind that there are deployment grants for enterprises. And I'm sure that if you're a small ISP or even a mid-sized ISP, talk to them about funding. I'm sure ISIF Asia would be happy to help. That's really an area that needs some help. We need to get all the ISPs to move to IPv6. So, just a couple of words about me. I've been working with IPv6 for a long time. I've written some RFCs, have some more on the way. But now about Yorgos. Yorgos has done presentations from us before, and they were very, very well received. In fact, that's why we wanted more. He has done a great deal in those 6LoW IoT area in many areas, and this session in particular is going to be very interesting because we're really going to get down into the packet level on how to debug stuff going on with 6LoWPAN. This builds on a number of the other IoT sessions that have happened. So now I will make him presenter, and then let's let him talk. Thank you so much, Yorgos.
Do you hear me? Hello.
Yes. You know, you're a little bit low. Can you make your volume a little bit higher? Is that possible for you?
Is it better now?
Not much.
Not much.
Oh, you want to try a little bit again?
Hello, everyone.
Yeah. Okay, that sounds good. Okay, please go ahead.
Do you see my screen by any chance?
Yes, we see your screen fine.
Okay, and okay, I think now it's it works. Hello, everyone. Thank you, Nalini, for introducing me, and I'm happy to be here for the second time. And this time I will try to finish with 6LoWPAN adaptation layer, since the last time I had the opportunity to present the compression operations, the compression functionalities of the 6LoWPAN adaptation layer. And today I'm here to talk about the fragmentation and reassembly, the frame delivery modes, and fragment forwarding. Again, I will try and I will go actually to the bytes and bits level during this talk. So I hope that you will be able to follow me, and if not, please ask questions anytime. So my name is again Georgios Papadopoulos. I am an associate professor at the engineering school at IMT Atlantique in the campus of Rennes in France. And a few words about my teaching and research interests. They span in the area of industrial IoT networks, on deterministic networking, on smart grid and metering, on battery management systems for electrical vehicles, and on integrated access and backhaul for 5G networks. So, considering that we have seen the IPv6 and UDP headers compression of the 6LoWPAN in our previous webinar talk, in this talk we are going to see the following 3 features of 6LoWPAN. So first, we will start with IPv6 packet per-hop fragmentation and reassembly operations. Then we will continue with the 2 frame delivery modes, the mesh under and the root over. Then in the section 3 or chapter 3, it is dedicated to the issues that root over and per-hop fragmentation and reassembly mode may potentially have. And finally, I will conclude this talk with the latest standard on 6LoWPAN, which was published in 2020, and is an alternate approach to per-hop fragmentation and reassembly. And it's called 6LoWPAN Fragment Forwarding, 6LFF, whereby an intermediate node forwards and fragment without reassembly. I will proceed now with the first chapter on 6LoWPAN per-hop fragmentation and reassembly. Now, as specified in the RFC 4944, when a compressed IPv6 datagram does not fit within a single IEEE 802.15.4 MTU, so MTU stands for maximum transmission unit, so in this case is 127 bytes, then fragmentation operation is required to split the large IPv6 datagrams into multiple link layer fragments, where each of them is equal to 127 bytes. Now, let us dive deeper to see the whole process of 6LoWPAN fragmentation and reassembly operation that was defined in RFC 4944. In order to enable fragmentation and reassembly operations, 6LoWPAN defines 2 fragment headers, where the header for the first fragment consists of 4 bytes, while the header for the subsequent fragments of 5 bytes. More specifically, the fragment headers come with the following fields. First, we have the datagram size. This first field is employed to encode the size of the original IPv6 datagram or packet. Then we have the second field, which is the datagram tag. Now, this field, in conjunction with the MAC source address, is employed to identify all link layer fragments of a single IPv6 datagram. Okay, so we have an IPv6 datagram that is split into n number of fragments, and we use the datagram tag to identify all these n fragments of a specific IPv6 datagram. Now, the third field, which is the last field in the datagram, in the header, excuse me, is the datagram offset. Now, this field is included only in the second and subsequent link layer fragments of an IPv6 packet, and it specifies the offset in increments of 8 bytes. Let's go more to the details. In other words, it identifies the relative position of the received link layer fragment from the beginning of the payload datagram. What does it mean? It means that the IPv6 packet is split into multiple fragments, and these fragments from the source node are transmitted to the destination, and at the receiver side, since the fragments may arrive out of sequence, we are going to use this datagram offset field in order to place the received fragment again to the original position before the fragmentation, actually. So actually, what does it mean? It means that this field of datagram offset allows us to have out of sequence delivery of the fragments. Here we have the fragmentation type and header format for the first link layer fragment, where the first 5 bits of dispatch value bit pattern indicates that fragmentation type. In this case, it is equal to 11000, so 5 bits, and it represents the first fragment of an IPv6 datagram. While in the figure below, the first 5 bits is equal to 11100, and it represents either the second or subsequent fragment of an IPv6 datagram. Now, the receiving node, upon receipt of a link layer fragment, it initiates the reassembly operation to reconstruct the original unfragmented IPv6 datagram, whose size is equal to datagram size. Towards this aim, the receiver checks first the datagram tag field to identify all fragments that belong to a given IPv6 datagram. Next, it checks the datagram offset to determine the location of the received individual fragment within the original unfragmented datagram. Finally, the receiver checks the datagram size field to identify the size of the original unfragmented datagram and consequently the size of the reassembly buffer. Why? Because we definitely need a buffer to place temporarily these fragments until we are done with the reassembly procedure of each IPv6 datagram. Furthermore, once the receiver successfully receives a new link layer fragment with a certain datagram tag, it will initiate what it's called reassembly timer. Now, the value of this reassembly timer, or the timeout, must be configured to a maximum of 60 seconds, which is the timeout of the IPv6 reassembly procedure. Now, if the IPv6 datagram has not been reconstructed within this time, meaning within the 60 seconds, the reassembly operation is aborted while the received fragment are discarded. So this is how the 6LoWPAN fragmentation and the reassembly procedure from the source to the destination works. Okay. So this was the first part of the 6LoWPAN adaptation layer, and now we'll proceed to 6LoWPAN frame delivery mode. In 6LoWPAN defines two frame delivery modes. First, we have the mesh under, and then we have the root over, or per-hop fragmentation and reassembly mode. Now, both approaches, meaning mesh under and root over, are widely employed in the smart grid and metering networks around the world. Okay, so it doesn't mean that one is better than the other. They're just two different approaches, and both of them are, deployed already and operating and they are using these two approaches in the industrials, and the operators in their smart grid and metering networks. Now, the first mode takes place, I'm talking about the mesh under, takes place at the 6LoWPAN adaptation layer, where the nodes require the knowledge of the routes at layer 2 based on MAC. Whereas the second mode does it at the layer 3 based on IP. Now, let's go deeper to see in detail these two modes. Now, as previously mentioned, in the mesh under mode, the routing and forwarding operations are performed at 6LoWPAN adaptation layer based on layer 2 addresses. And thus, the IPv6 header does not need to be unpacked. Indeed, the network layer assumes that all nodes share the same prefix, where multiple link layer hops, meaning layer 2, may be employed to complete a single IP hop. To forward the received fragment to its destination in mesh under mode, the node requires knowing its address, which is defined here, the final destination address. And furthermore, in order to perform the reassembly operation, which is done only at the destination node, be careful, at the destination node and not at each intermediate one, the node requires knowing the address of the original source, what is called in this RFC 4944 standard, the originator address. Considering that at each forwarding step, the link layer destination and source addresses are overwritten by the addresses of the next hop and by the node performing the forwarding. This information regarding the final destination address and the originator address needs to be stored somewhere else. Towards the same, 6LoWPAN defines the mesh header in RFC 4944, where 1 and 0 are the first 2 bits. In addition to the addresses, the originator address and the final address, the mesh header stores layer 2 equivalent of an IPv6 hop limit, which is called hops left. This value must be decremented by a forwarding node before sending the frame on its next hop. Now, if the value reaches 0, the frame is discarded silently. Finally, the mesh header defines the V and F bits that indicate whether the originator or very first address and the final destination address, respectively, are 16 bits short or 64 bits EUI64 addresses. Let's take an example to see how it works. Let's assume now that the node S uses the mesh under approach to deliver a frame, and we have the node D that is the destination in this small example. Then the node, it must include a mesh addressing header with the originator's link layer address set to its own, which means in this case S, and the final destination's link layer address set to the frame's ultimate destination. In this case is the node D. So we have S and D as the two addresses at the 6LoWPAN mesh header. Furthermore, it sets in the layer 2, so we are in the MAC layer now, layer 2 headers source address field its own link layer address, and it includes the forwarders, which means in this case the node B, link layer address in the layer 2 headers destination address field. Okay, so what we have here, we have the layer 2 with S and B, so the source and the forwarding addresses, MAC addresses, and we have the very first source, which is again in this case S, and the very final destination, in this case is the D, at the 6LoWPAN mesh header. Similarly, when a forwarding node receives a frame, in this case the node B, it will check the mesh addressing header final address field to determine the final destination according to the following 3 options. If the node itself is the final destination, it will initiate the reassembly of the IPv6 packet. If it is not the final destination, the node then reduces the hops left field, and if its result is 0, it discards the frame. Otherwise, the node consults its link layer routing table, determines the next hop toward the final destination, and sets that layer 2 address in the destination address field of the layer 2 header. Finally, the node changes the layer 2 header's source address to its own link layer address, and it transmits the frame. As you can see, we have the mesh header remains the same, so S and D are unchanged, while hop by hop we are changing the source and the destination between the two relay nodes, so which is the layer 2 in this case. Now, these operations are performed for each frame in each intermediate node before an IPv6 packet reaches its destination. Okay. Now, the second approach of 6LoWPAN frame delivery is called the route over or per-hop fragmentation and reassembly mode, where the routing and forwarding tasks are executed at the network layer, the layer 3, based on IP. Therefore, in route over operation or route over mode, each link layer hop is an IP hop. In a route over 6LoWPAN network, the received fragments of the same IPv6 fragmented packet are expected to be first reassembled at each intermediate node and then decompressed to reconstruct the original IPv6 packet, pushed to layer 3 to be routed according to the routing protocol, such as the REPL. REPL is this layer here, as you can see, RPL. We call it REPL at the IETF. And then compressed and fragmented again before being forwarded to the next hop. So you see what happens here is that at each relay node, the IPv6 packet is reassembled at the layer 3 and then fragmented again through the 6LoWPAN layer before forwarded fragment by fragment to the next hop. Let's take an example to see here how the route over works, and considering again the same topology where the node S is the source node and the node D is the destination. The fragmented IPv6 packet is transmitted to the next hop node B based on the IPv6 header and the routing protocol that is running on top. As I said before, we can use in this example the routing protocol RPL, REPL. Upon the reception of the first fragment, node B employs the incoming reassembly buffer to store the received fragment. Okay, and it initiates the reassembly and decompression operations to reconstruct the original unfragmented IPv6 packet. Then, contrary to the mesh under mode, it will pass the original packet to the layer 3 in order to check the IPv6 original source and final destination headers. If node B is not the final destination, it will push down to the 6LoWPAN layer again to compress and fragmentation operations again. Finally, based on its layer 3 routing table, it will forward the packet to the next hop, which is the node F in this example. Again, the same procedure will take place in the rest of the path until the final destination is reached. So the IPv6 packet reassembly will take place at the layer 6LoWPAN, the node F. It will push again this the packet up to the layer 3 to read the destination and the source IPv6 addresses, and it will be pushed down to the 6LoWPAN layer again. This is the yellow color as you see here for compression and potentially fragmentation purposes, and it will be forwarded to the next hop, which is the node D in this case. I will proceed now to the chapter 3, where we are going to detail the issues when route over mode is employed. Now, 6LoWPAN employs a frame delivery mechanism that is ill-suited for a 6LoWPAN root over mode, where the reassembly and fragmentation of the entire IPv6 packet is required at every IPv6 hop along the multi-hop path. Now, in the following, we are going to see the issues related to the 6LoWPAN per-hop fragmentation and reassembly approach. So first, we have the issue in terms of the network reliability. Now, when a node receives the first fragment of a certain IPv6 packet, as I said previously, it will initiate the reassembly timer, which is typically set to a maximum of 60 seconds, okay? Now, if all fragments are not received during this reassembly period, then the reassembly of the datagram is not possible. What does it mean? It means that the received fragments being discarded from the incoming reassembly buffer. Now, note that if even one fragment is missing, the receiver cannot proceed with the reassembly operation. So it means that if I have an IPv6 packet that is fragmented to 8 fragments, unfortunately, we cannot proceed with the reassembly operation if even one fragment out of the 8 will be missing. The next issue here is that we have the latency issue. Indeed, the reassembly operation at each hop significantly increases the end-to-end delay. Plus, we have to consider that we have additional computation time for fragments. Again, the previously reassembled IPv6 packets. So we have to do at each relay node the same procedure. You see the reassembly of the fragments, and then we have to fragment again the previously reassembled IPv6 packet, which introduces additional computational time. And as a result, what happens is that the more hops, you see here we have forwarder 1, forwarder 2. So the more hops we have in the path towards the destination, the higher is the end-to-end delay. End-to-end means from the source to the destination. Next, we have the fragmentation process, which introduces inefficient resource usage since it requires large incoming reassembly buffers at the forwarding node. In fact, to proceed with complete reassembly at each hop, a relay node may require 1,280 bytes or more of buffer space when considering the IPv6 datagrams. Now, considering that sensor devices are extremely constrained in terms of memory, it will be possible to reassemble only very few complete IPv6 packets. Let's see here an example. Therefore, when we have several consecutive datagrams in the wireless multi-hop network, so in this case, let's assume that we have the node B, which is the receiver. And what does it mean? It means that it has the incoming reassembly buffer. And then we have the two devices A and C that are sending the fragments. So in this case, the node A is transmitting the 7th fragment of the IPv6 datagram from the node A. And then on the other side, we have the first fragment of an IPv6 datagram that is initiated from the node C. So here what happens is that given several consecutive datagrams in this wireless, let's assume multi-hop, even though in this case you can see only the one hop part of the large network, an ongoing reassembled datagram A. So in this case, you see here we have the reassembly of the datagram IPv6 datagram from the node A. So you see that we have already received the first 6 fragments, and the node B is expecting to receive the 7th fragment from the node C. what will happen is that the ongoing reassembled datagram A may be discarded when a new fragment of datagram C is received. So in this case, when the datagram, the first fragment of datagram C is received, while previous datagram A has not yet entirely been reassembled. So why we have this problem? Simply because the node B, the receiver, doesn't have enough memory, enough bytes, enough bytes in its buffer to buffer second or third or fourth IPv6 datagrams. Because we have to consider that for each reassembly, for each IPv6 packet reassembly, the node B should dedicate a specific memory in terms of byte in its memory, depending the datagram. If you remember datagram size that I spoke, you remember datagram tag, datagram size, and datagram datagram size tag. I don't remember the third one. So by using the datagram size, the node B will allocate this dedicated IPv6 size in its buffer. So the more IPv6 packets are arriving to the destination, the more dangerous that we will have these issues regarding the resource usage. Now, what happens is that such issues will introduce more losses in the multi-hop network. And finally, the fourth issue that I'm going to present here is in terms of the implementation point of view. Now, according to the RFC 4944, only, unfortunately, and I do not see if we can solve this problem, only the first fragment of the IPv6 data packet contains the source and destination IPv6 addresses, while the following fragments are routed based on the datagram tag. Okay, so only the first fragment uses the IPv6 packets, source and destination, while all the subsequent fragments are forwarded or routed based on this datagram tag value that is introduced by the RFC 4944. Now, this datagram tag field is misleading because the value, actually the tag, is unique only to the 6LoWPAN original source and final destination nodes. As a result, what happens is that two different traffic flows may be tagged with the same value, which could introduce implementation issues during the storing of the fragment forwarding state. So, for example, in this case, we have two different traffic flows in this multi-hop network traversing through the nodes A and B. So we have the traffic flow blue and the traffic flow yellow-orange color, and they are going through the node A and B. What may happen is that the nodes the source nodes of each of these traffic flows may label with the same datagram tag value during the fragmentation operation. So basically, it means that the node A, the source of this fragmentation process, may select arbitrary, because there is no a rule how each device selecting the value for the datagram tag in the 6LoWPAN, the value 5. Similarly, there is this high probability that the node B may select exactly the same value for its datagram tag field. So what will happen is that when these fragments are traversing the multi-hop network, and they will eventually arrive to the common node, which is called, in this case, node M, and then the node M will forward these fragments to this common node C, and in this case, the node C will be the confused node. It means that it doesn't know to which next hop to forward the fragments to. Why? Because the node C receives, as you can see here, the fragments. So we do not know about anything about the IPv6 source and the destination. We only know the datagram tag. And by receiving exactly the same datagram tag, this node C doesn't know where to forward, whether to node X or to Y. Okay? Because, as I said earlier, the second or subsequent fragments are forwarded based on datagram tag value and not based on the IPv6. Yep. Now I will proceed in this chapter 4, which is my last chapter in this talk, and I will show you how this new RFC solves the problem of the previously presented, even the last issue related to the datagram tags. Now, the 6LoWPAN fragment forwarding, or 6LFF, is an alternate approach to per-hop fragmentation and reassembly. Now, the idea here is that the nodes the intermediate nodes, in this case, the node B, will forward a fragment without reassembly, which means that the routing decision is made on the first fragment of the IPv6 packet. Now, considering that the IPv6 header, considering that the first fragment carries the IPv6 header, which means the source and the destination addresses, the first fragment will be forwarded immediately. And what will happen is that some state, let's say some information, will be kept on the intermediate nodes in order to enable forwarding the subsequent fragments along the path towards the destination. Okay, I'm coming with the details in a while. So basically, what happens is that the node A sends the first fragment, which contains the information regarding the source and destination IPv6 addresses. And when the node B will receive this first fragment, instead of waiting for the rest of the fragments to be received in order to do reassembly and then to fragment again before sending to the next hop, which is the R in this case, the node B, whenever it will receives, it will check the header of the IPv6. It will keep some information here we are going to discuss right after, and it will immediately forward this fragment to the next hop. So I think you can imagine already that we are gaining, if you remember, this 60 seconds regarding the reassembly procedure. Now, let us dive deeper to see the whole process of the 6LoWPAN forwarding. Now, 6LFF was published in November of 2020, and it is defined in RFC 8930. The core idea of 6LFF is when receiving the first fragment of an IPv6 packet, the intermediate node, the node B, will decompress the IPv6 header. So if you remember in our previous webinar talk, we talked about the compression and the decompression. So this is the compressed IPv6 header. It will determine, so it means that it did the decompression. Now here we have the original IPv6 header. And as you can see, we have all the information that we need, the source and destination address. So the intermediate node will determine the next hop according to the destination IPv6 address. that is included in the first fragment. Be careful. And then it will forward this received fragment immediately to that neighbor, meaning to the one that was indicated in the IPv6 header in the destination address field. While doing that, it will keep some information, as we said, in locally. So in this case, as you can see, we have the use actually of the datagram tag. And in this example, let's assume that the datagram tag is equal to 23. So eventually what we have is that the first fragment, I'm trying to summarize here, is sent from A to node B. The node B decompressed the first fragment, detected the destination IPv6 address. It kept the information regarding the datagram tag for this fragment, and it immediately sent this fragment to the destination. So you see that we do not have anymore what we called before per-hop fragmentation and reassembly, while here we have fragment forwarding. That's why it's called 6LFF. Now, when receiving the subsequent fragment, so I'm talking about the node B, of the same IPv6 packet. So let's say that here we have the fragment 4, the fourth fragment, which have the same datagram tag, the 23. The node, the intermediate node, the node B here, will forward these fragments immediately to the next hop. So what happens here is that we have for the second and subsequent fragments, every time that the fragment is arrived to this intermediate node, it will check the datagram tag from the 6LoWPAN header, mesh header, and it will forward if it's equal to the one that is in this case 23. It will forward directly to the destination. Now, once all the fragments have successfully arrived at the final destination, only then the IPv6 packet will be reassembled. So here we assume that the node A sent all 8 fragments to the next hop, and the node B, which is the next hop, forwarded all of them based on the datagram tag to the final destination. The node R, which is the reassembly node, received all these 8 fragments and make the reassembly of the IPv6 packet. Now, to do whatever I presented previously, so this 6LFF operation, 6LFF introduces what is called virtual reassembly buffer, or VRB for short. It is a technique that can be implemented without changing the RFC 4944. You see, what does it mean is that we have backward compatibility. So it is very similar to a switching table. Each intermediate node maintains a VRB table in which the entries correspond to IPv6 packets in the process of being forwarded. So as you can see here, we have a table. This is the table, VRB table of the node B, and each entry it's dedicated for one IPv6 packet. In the beginning, all VRB tables of all nodes are empty, though they do have a maximum pre-allocated memory. Now, each VRB entry is a tuple of 4 elements. We have the link layer address of the previous hop, so in this case of the node A, the locally unique datagram tag. So here is the value of the datagram tag. Link layer address of the next hop. So in this case will be R. And the locally unique datagram tag for the outgoing fragment. Okay, so I'm going to explain a little bit this part. If you remember, I talked about the datagram tag issue that there is a collision because there is a high probability that two nodes may select exactly the same datagram tags. Now, in order to solve this problem, this RFC 4930 and the VRB technique, what they are doing is that at each intermediate node, the devices are going to swap the value of this tag. So in this case, for instance, if the node A will send a fragment with datagram tag equal to 12, for instance, then the node B, so here in this port will be the value 12. Then the node B, before sending this fragment to the next hop, it will swap this value to 23, for instance, in order to guarantee that if there will be two values of 12 at the outgoing column, we will have two different tag values. So like this, we are avoiding this implementation issue related to the tags. I think I have an example later, and we will see how it works. Now, assuming that we have a 64-bit link layer addresses and 16-bit datagram tags, now one VRB entry will require a memory of 20 bytes. Okay, so it means that each entry that is dedicated for IPv6 packets will require, at the end of the day, only 20 bytes, contrary to the RFC 4944, where each entry actually is the size of the IPv6 packet. Okay. Now, when an intermediate node receives the first fragment of an IPv6 packet from a neighbor with a datagram tag not registered for that neighbor in VRB table, so here we have the first fragment from the node A, and it comes with datagram tag equal to 23. It will create a new entry in the VRB table, and it will record the link layer address of the previous hop and the datagram tag of the incoming fragment. So as I said previously, it will register here the link layer address, so the MAC address of the node A, and the datagram tag that it was tagged from the source. So here is the value of 23. Next, the intermediate node will determine the link layer address of the next hop based on the IPv6 address contained in the first datagram, in the first fragment, excuse me. So in this case, is the next hop is the R, so it will register the link layer address of the node R. And finally, it will pick a new datagram tag for the outgoing fragment that is unique for the next hop node. So you see here, it swaps from 23 to 47 in order to avoid the implementation issue when two nodes pick exactly the same datagram tag value and they are transmitted to a common intermediate node. Moreover, it will set a timer that allows discarding this stale 6LFF state after some timeout. So it means that after a certain period, this entry will be removed since there is no news, in order to be able to accommodate new IPv6 datagrams to forward. Then what happens is that all subsequent fragments of the same IPv6 packet will go through the same process. Okay, so we have the same process for the fourth and fifth, sixth, seventh, and the eighth fragments, and they will be forwarded to the next hop by employing this newly created VRB entry. So meaning that now from the second and subsequent fragments, they are just using these incoming and outgoing filters to forward to the next hop the fragments. Now, more specifically, the intermediate node of each subsequent fragment will use its source link layer address and datagram tag in the incoming columns of the VRB table and will forward based on the outgoing columns. Okay. Finally, upon forwarding the last fragment, so the 8th fragment here, the node clears the VRB entry from its table in order to accommodate, as I said earlier, new IPv6 datagrams. As a result, the VRB technique allows intermediate nodes, the relay nodes, to immediately forward the received fragments without reassembling the complete IPv6 packet first, which is the case in RFC 4944. Now, a few words about the advantages and disadvantages. So the advantage of employing VRB table and the fragment forwarding scheme over the per-hop reassembly are multiple. First, we have the end-to-end latency, which should be greatly reduced since the intermediate nodes do not need to reassemble and then fragment again the IPv6 packets before forwarding to the next hop. Next, the end-to-end network reliability should be improved since the memory footprint of VRB table is just the VRB table and not the actual size of each IPv6 packet. So we have 20 bytes per entry instead of the actual size of each IPv6 packet, which reduces significantly the fragment drop probability. Furthermore, the datagram tag issue is solved by swapping the tags at each hop instead of having the same globally unique. Now, a few words regarding the drawbacks. Even though 6LFF based on the VRB method overcomes certain issues of per-hop fragmentation and reassembly of RFC 4944, it comes with some limitations as well. And the first one is that there is no fragment recovery built in. So in case a single fragment is lost along the multi-hop path, then there is no mechanism in 6LFF, be careful, in the RFC 8930 for the node that reassembles an IPv6 packet to request for it. Now, here I would like to make a parenthesis and to let you know that we do have a new RFC, which is recently published. It's called RFC 8931, that solves this problem of fragment recovery. Unfortunately, I didn't have the time to put this standard here as well to present you, but I hope that I will have an opportunity in the future to talk about this standard as well. This issue introduces unnecessary traffic in the network since the remaining fragments are forwarded even when the destination node can never reassemble the original IPv6 packet. So moreover, what does it mean? It means that it requires the whole IPv6 packet to be resent from the source node. All this simply because we do not have in RFC 8930 the fragment recovery mechanism. Next, 6LoWPAN fragment forwarding does not support per fragment routing. Why? Because only the first fragment contains the IPv6 header and thus the IPv6 destination address, which means that all subsequent fragments must follow the same path toward the destination as the first fragment. As a side effect is that the first fragment must always be forwarded first. Finally, even though each entry reserves a small footprint in the VRB table, there is a probability for IPv6 packet to be dropped. Why? Because the size of the VRB table is necessarily finite. What does it mean? It means that in the extreme case where the number of IPv6 packets concurrently traversing an intermediate node is larger than the size of the entries in its VRB table, then IPv6 packets are dropped. To conclude my talk, I want you to remember that 6LoWPAN fragment forwarding is an implementation technique, not as new protocol. That makes it fully compatible with the per-hop fragmentation and reassembly of the original 6LoWPAN root over mode of RFC 4944. That's it regarding my talk. Here I have some information if you want to reach me out, my email, my website, and the channel that I have created recently on YouTube for educational purposes. So I am uploading frequently subjects regarding to IPv6, regarding to 6LoWPAN, and CoAP, and all the IETF and IEEE related protocols, and not only. And I have 2 slides that are that I would like to share with you, the news regarding the MOOC that is online. So me and my colleagues, we have worked the past 2 years on a massive online open courses that is called IoT Communications and Networks. It is on the, you will find this this course on the Coursera platform. It is launched, so you can go there, create an account on Coursera if you don't have one, and start following the course. And in this course, you have everything that I said today. So you see, the week 3 of the MOOC is dedicated for IPv6 and 6LoWPAN. So the 2 talks that I gave in this webinar series are within, you will find it in the MOOC in the week 3. Then the talk that Pascal Toubert gave and other guys, I assume, regarding the 60-ish, the scheduling function and the resource allocation layer, or the TSCH, the MAC layer protocol, or the routing protocol, the REPL, all of them you will find it in this MOOC. And yeah, this is the educational team. And of course, we try to get some industrials to give their inputs why it is important for the industrials, these protocols. So for instance, we had an interview with Pascal Toubert to discuss and to explain us why it is so important for Cisco, the routing protocol. We spoke with an engineer from Enedis. Enedis is a energy distributor for the smart grid networks in France, and they are using in their networks the 6LoWPAN adaptation layer, and they talked about why they are using 6LoWPAN, why it is necessary for them. And then we spoke with Thomas Batain from Analog Devices about the importance of the 60s adaptation layer and why they are using and how they are using, etc. So that's it from my side. I'm happy to, if we have the time, to discuss a little bit, to answer your questions if you have any.
Yes, thank you so much, Yorgos. This is absolutely incredible. Any questions? Please raise your hand, or you know, you can type them in the question window too. I'm not seeing very many. I was just going to ask you about implementation, and then you know, you came out with some implementations. I think that's very, very good. Is because if we can see them live, then that's wonderful. Yeah, this is a fabulous presentation, Yorgos. I'm not hearing any questions, and surprisingly, I'm not finding any myself either. It was very, very well done. And so if any of the rest of you have comments, please send them to me offline. I'll go ahead and forward them to Yorgos. Let me thank you again for your presentation. It was wonderful. It's recorded, and so we will make that available to everyone. And I encourage you guys to go ahead and sign up for the MOOC. I think it's if you really want to dive in and get to know all the details, that's really the place to go. So thank you again, and we will see you in 2 weeks, I hope, to talk about EULA addresses for IPv6. Okay, thank you so much. Okay. Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.